broadcast 1, Resource speaking.
Pressure coming here, pressure coming.
We're 1.5 below.
Stand by, 2 dives here, boys.
We're looking at 10.5 and 42.
Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us on another podcast. I'm back on a blustery seafront in Cowes, looking at a rather empty Solent. It's been a bumper summer here with the Fastnet, Cowes Week of course, the Royals, Will and Kate racing each other off the Royal Yacht Squadron. Brilliant. And a rather nail-biting Sail GP. But now there is a wonderful calmness about the place. I'm just back from holidaying, 2 weeks windsurfing in France with the family, watching Robbie Nash videos in the evening and wishing I was a whole lot better at it. I also surprisingly really enjoyed open water swimming and was full of bravado when I got home about swimming every day. I'll let you know how that goes, and any tips on keeping warm as the winter progresses would be well received. Well, many of you left such fantastic feedback about last month's Chris Draper pod. Thank you, it really makes a difference, and you know, he's a real gem, and I'm so glad you thought so too. We spoke to Chris just before he led the British team into the Cowes Sail GP event. If you missed it, it didn't pan out as he had hoped. They started the week by being the first team to break the much sought after and hyped 50-knot barrier, and had high hopes for a decent result come racing. But a rather blustery and choppy Cowes took a few scalps, and theirs was one of them. A violent nosedive saw Chris catapulted out of the cockpit. If you haven't seen it, it's pretty brutal. I mean, definitely worth a look. And not only was Chris pretty beaten up, but so was the machine. So much damage, in fact, that their event was over. Now, this next pod, we actually recorded a little while ago in Nassau, Bahamas, at the brilliant event that's the Star Sailors League final. An event full of sailing legends, and leading the charge at the top of the legend status leaderboard was this man, Paul Cayard. He's without doubt American sailing royalty, with an almost unfeasible sailing CV. A fierce competitor, an Olympian, ocean race winner, America's Cup veteran, and so much more. Cayard, as you will hear, is also a brilliant communicator. He refreshingly comes from an era of sailors who said what they think, who has opinion, and is untouched by any media training spin. I have just listened to this pod again and was captivated. Great candid stories, funny moments, and at times quite emotional. I hope you enjoy the hour I spent with Paul Cayard.
Podcast number 1, guy who hates to lose, still hates to lose. How lucky did I get to be the guy that Disney called up and said, will you be Captain Jack Sparrow?
Well, Paul, thank you very much for joining me on our podcast. I'm so delighted that you're doing this. And you know, we're currently in Nassau at the Star Sailors League. And I really wanted to speak to you here, partly because I know you're terribly fond of this place. And also, you're never happier, are you, than when you're helming your Star?
That's correct. I got 2 loves of my life here. Nassau, I've always said, is the best place in the world to sail. And the Star is my favorite boat. So yeah, when those 2 things come together, I'm super happy. And today was a great day for me, kind of getting my boat sorted out and having at least three really good races out of 4 and qualifying for the SSL finals. So yeah, I'm happy.
What is it about Nassau that's so special?
You know, Nassau was one of those places when I was a kid that still had that real island mystique, and was much less. I first came here in 1978, 40 years ago, and there was no, well, there might have been one bridge, but there was no Atlantis, and you know, everything was just very basic. Vince Brune and I used to go boogie boarding over on some beach on Paradise Island. You could fly here on a seaplane called Chalks and land in the harbor, and it was just that epitome of an island, sandy beaches, super crystal clear water, and Durwood Knolls was one of the kings of the star class of that time, like with Lowell North and Connor and Blackhollar, and this was his home waters. And so we were coming, whenever we would race here, we were coming to Durwood's home waters. And
Durwood, of course, gold medalist from
yeah,
Melbourne.
yeah, Durwood, gold medalist, 1964, and I own the boat, Jim, now. So I'm really proud and happy, and I think he's happy too.
I can't believe that you're still, you're so into it, Paul, still. You're in great shape. I know you've been really training for this event. What do you think keeps you going to that level still?
It's probably just ego, I was talking to an old basketball coach who's coached Notre Dame basketball, which was some school that I idolized when I was in high school. And in fact, one of my classmates played basketball at Notre Dame, and we were talking about the aging athlete, and it's something we all have to deal with. And sailing, we're pretty fortunate because we keep racing. Baseball players and football players, they're done when they're 35, and sailors and golfers get to kind of keep going. So, but it's interesting. The body's a little slower, everything is a little sore, and it hurts. But the brain, that competitive brain, is the same. The guy who hates to lose still hates to lose, and that doesn't ever change. So I think it just keeps me going. And after the first 2 days here, I was a little bit thinking, oh boy, maybe my days really are coming up, but you see what I did, a little tweak to the mast and move the step back a little, and it's a new boat.
It takes a lot of effort. I'm going to mention your age. You're 59, but as I say, in great shape. You can walk around in Lycra, Paul Cayard, and not many people can. But you look at the lineup, particularly here in Nassau. It's it's the current champions. It's some phenomenal athletes right in their prime, and yet you can still mix it with them. And how does that make you feel?
Makes me feel great. It's the best age-defying medicine that there is, to come and race with these Finn sailors and the Hungarian kid who won the Finn Gold Cup, or Georgina, who won the Finn Gold Cup previously and then just won the Star Worlds. Same thing was happening on the last day of the Star Worlds. I was battling it. I had a chance to win the Star Worlds on the last day, which hasn't happened to me in maybe 30 years. And of course, again, the ego gets going, and even though I didn't really expect to do that well, there I was the morning of the last race, and I have a chance to win this thing. And then I didn't win. I came in third, and so I can't. And it was a windy day like this, the last day. And we had a double header, and Jorginho was good and fast and 26 years old, but I was disappointed. I was all bummed out, and it took about a week before I realized that was a pretty darn good achievement. And then I became a little bit more satisfied with it. But yeah, all that just keeps you going. I guess you just don't ever want to think that you're over the hill.
I think the last time we hung out was in Bermuda, and you're one of my go-tos in television. A man who actually has credibility and has a massive opinion, and I love that. And we were in the rib, weren't we? Do you remember? We were watching.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We were watching, the Kiwis in Oracle, and you had your head in your hands most of the time. Watching Jimmy Spittle trying to start.
Yeah. That was our last time, and we've had a number of great interviews. You've done some great CNN mainsails that I really appreciate having in my archive, and I'll never forget the first time I met you in Athens, and I asked you to take the picture of me and Phil getting the silver medal at the pre-Olympics, and I honestly wasn't sure. There were three blondes sitting behind me. I didn't know who was what, and someone said, "Oh, you just asked Shirley Robertson to take your picture." I'm like, "Oh, that was pretty impressive." So, yeah, I think I really respect the work you do. I watch all your CNN mainsails and everything, and you're a great reporter, and it's great to have someone as knowledgeable to talk to, because you get it. and you can present it to the public.
Oh, that's sweet. But I love having you in my boat at the America's Cup, because actually you're not afraid to say what you think, and quite often, particularly in this sport, that's very rare. I properly treasure that. Why do you think you feel comfortable sort of voicing an opinion?
I guess I probably think that my insight's pretty good, and I'm willing to back that and go public with it, and not afraid of that. An interesting observation is when I first started doing the America's Cup, Blackhaller and Connor were and Buddy Melgis were in Perth, and the ones I'm thinking of are the press conferences in Perth, and I mean they used to just say whatever came to their mind, and it was. And that prevailed for 87, 92. We were pretty good that way too. Me and Chris Dixon and Ian Murray, but it seems to me that over the subsequent 20 or 30 years, things have gotten really dumbed down, and everybody wants to make a politically correct statement rather than really what they think. And it's unfortunate, because I think it takes a lot of the personality out of the interviews, which is what the public wants to see, and they want to see your personality and your opinions, unrestrained. So I think, every once in a while I'll put my foot in my mouth, but by and large, I like the way I handle my public representation.
Do you not care what people think, Paul? What do you think actually people think of you?
Well, you have different types of people. I think people who really know me know that I'm a pretty nice guy, and of course I'm a competitive person, and I can be intense and aggressive. I can be all of that, but I'm also pretty compassionate and willing to help people. People who don't know me probably see more, maybe they might think of me as cocky, and the outspokenness might come off as being a little brash, and it might put some people off.
One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about was I suppose how diverse our sport is, and how you've managed to sort of occupy all the corners. You've been offshore, you won offshore, you've been in the America's Cup, you've ran an America's Cup team, you've been to the Olympics. From small boats all the way up. And we talk about some of the youngsters now as being able to, people like Pete Burling, they've just America's Cup, full ocean race, Olympic medals. But you've done all that as well. And I wonder what sort of mindset you need to just, take your skills from star sailing and then, move that into, the offshore world or the America's Cup world. And looking back, what you make of that incredible career.
I think the main thing that allowed me to adapt to all the different disciplines within our sport is just determination. So the will to win and the distaste for losing drives me to succeed. Then you need a certain amount of creativity. Again, this will probably sound cocky, but I mean, you have to be able to figure things out in these different games. You have to figure out, well, what works in this game? How are we going to win the Whitbread Around the World race? We're a bunch of Olympic sailors and America's Cup sailors, but we had a philosophy and a strategy, and we had a few mistakes early on, but we learned from our mistakes, and we built a very good mousetrap. So I think the key traits are, if you're determined to win, you will, and you're relatively smart, you're going to find a way.
Are you surprised by the Pete Burlings and the Blair Tukes and how successful they've been? They're not even 30.
Yeah. Well, you have some extreme talents. Mark Mendelblatt here is a great example of probably a pretty extreme talent. I mean, Robert Scheidt won the qualifiers, but Robert sails a lot in small boats, and he's very prepared. Mendelblatt showed up the afternoon of the last practice day and went out for a 1-hour sail against nobody and was leading the thing after yesterday. So I think Mendelblatt's also a great talent, but not being used to the level that Robert is using his talent. And Burling and Tuke and Nathan, these people are extremely talented and they're young. So now it's about cultivating that talent and putting some structure around it to go and achieve great things. Will they be the skippers and leaders of their America's Cup team and get technologically interested in the nuances that are going on the boat? Obviously, with all that foil control and everything, Burling and Nathan had to be very involved with the designers, and their foiling experience in the Moth helps them out a lot. They already understand about the angle of the foils, and so history repeats itself. Before me there was Dennis Conner, who really reinvented the America's Cup and how to play that game.
Let's talk offshore. Won the Volvo Ocean Race with EF, and then next campaign, one of the most exciting campaigns I think we've ever had in the sport, with Disney, Pirates of the Caribbean. How did that come about, and how special was that time?
So I had won the Whitbread Round the World race 8 years before, and I just finished Athens. It was May of 2005, and I wasn't really doing too much looking. I think I was sailing a little Far 40, maybe with Kilroy, and I got a phone call one day from the Disney people, and it was like May 3rd in 2005, and they said, we'd really like to do the Volvo Ocean Race, and we were told that you're a person we should interview or contact. Could you come down to Burbank and have a meeting with us next Friday? I said, sure, I'll come down. So, I already knew, of course, that Bauer Becking had built his boat, the Telefonica, in Australia, and was already halfway around the world sailing the thing back up to Europe as part of his training, and that the ABN boats were being built. I knew that a lot was happening with that race, which would start basically November 1st, 6 months later. So I went to that meeting, and they had these easels up with a bunch of artist renderings of what the sails would look like with the pirates and the skull and crossbones, and the t-shirts, how the t-shirts were going to look, and the caps, and all this stuff. And so they gave me about a 20-minute introduction as to what their idea was, and they wanted to promote the second movie. So the first movie was called Curse of the Black Pearl, I believe, and the second movie was going to be called Dead Man's Chest. So the boat would be the Black Pearl, and the Dead Man's Chest movie was going to be released while we were going around the world, and they were going to leverage all the stopovers with their movie theater owners, and they had this whole plan. So they went on for probably a half hour, 40 minutes, and then I said to him, well, that sounds fantastic, but do you have a designer of the boat, or have you contacted anybody to build this boat? Oh, well, no, that's why we're talking to you. And I said, well, one thing you should know is it takes 8 months to build one of these boats, and the race is going to start in 6 months. And they said, oh, well, isn't there anything we can do about that? So pretty much the meeting ended, and I flew home. I told my wife at the time about it, and, it just sounded crazy and risky, and then I called a good friend of mine who was a watch captain on EF, Kimo Worthington, and I described it about the same length that I just described to you, and he goes, I'm in. I said, Kimo, no, that was not the right answer. He goes, Paul, it'll be amazing. We'll figure it out. We'll do it. Let's go. So we agreed, pretty much we did. We just dug in, and we got clever. We were able to buy the molds off of Ericsson. So we saved the 6 weeks there, and people worked double time at Green Marine and in England, and we got the boat about 3 weeks before the race started. It really wasn't finished, and we broke the boat on the first night out in the ocean off Portugal, and but we managed to cobble the whole thing together and finish second, which in some ways was more satisfying actually than winning the first time, because the challenge, the hill was steeper, and we had a lot of fun along the way, being pirates and entertaining kids at all the stopovers. So it was a fantastic experience. And one other tidbit when I was considering whether or not to do it was, who wouldn't, how lucky did I get to be the guy that Disney called up and said, will you be Captain Jack Sparrow?
Did you ever meet Johnny Depp?
Yeah. So what happened was at the London premiere, we sailed the boat after the race was over. We sailed the boat or powered it up the Thames River, and we had it docked on one of your piers up there near the London Bridge, and they had the premiere in town. And after the premiere, Dick Cook, who was the CEO of Disney Pictures at the time, and Johnny Depp presented me with the sword from the movie. I have it on a plaque, and it says, to Captain Paul Cayard from Captain Jack Sparrow. That's one of my favorite trophies.
I remember that first night. I was at the start of that race, and you all left in northern Spain, and then the reports started coming in. It was the first time, wasn't it, with Canton Keels, and all kinds of bother out in the Bay of Biscay. And one thing I loved your reports because it was the first time really that the drama came alive, and everyone was following the Black Pearl. And here, first night, the drama had started.
Yeah. Yeah, we had, damage to the plates that cover there's quite a large hole in the bottom of the boat to allow the canting keel to swing 40 degrees either side of centerline. And that system that slides across the hull had ripped off, and so we essentially had a 2-foot by 1-foot hole in the bottom of the boat. It's contained in a case inside the boat, but if the lid to that case breaks, which it had a lot of water pressure on it at 30 knots, the water would simply flood into the boat. So we had to throttle way down and eventually just head back to Portugal.
Why did you want to communicate so much off the boat? Because at that time, it just wasn't the way it was done. Normally they just kind of left and occasionally you got a report. But, it felt like it was almost cathartic maybe that you wanted to tell your story.
Yeah, and I think earlier you asked me about what do I think people think of me, and I think some people think of my prolific writing off the boats as self-promotion, but really it never was that contrived or premeditated, especially in the EF days. That whole thing with Quokka Sports, the internet had just started in '96. And what it is that when I'm in that environment, I write for Seahorse and a few other magazines every other month, so I do a lot of writing. And when I'm in an environment like that, it's just the stuff flows easily. People might think I spend hours writing 1,000 words. I can bang out a 1,000-word story in 15 minutes. And when I'm stimulated that way, and it's the best way to write when it's really coming to you naturally and it's just flowing. So I never had any trouble at all creating content and trying to bring the race to the fans.
The Pirates deal as well was all about exposure. It was essentially part of the job. I'm sure you watched this last edition, but it was the first time perhaps that we'd seen the boats racing from off the boat. Amazing drone footage. What did you think when you watched that? I thought that's just so cool.
I wish I had drone footage of my epic, sailing in the Southern Ocean. And in one day in particular, I wish I had a picture of I was steering the boat. I sailed 3 times around Cape Horn, 2 full races, but in 2002, I did just the Auckland to Rio leg with Grant Dalton. And when it got really windy, only me, Bauer Becking, and Chris Nicholson, drove the boat because it's just, nobody else. And we had Freddie Loof on the boat. But I was driving, and Dalton had just come up on deck, or he was standing next to me. And it was blowing 45, and we might have been just on a headsail and the main, kind of reaching along, doing probably 30, 32 knots. And sort of in the Southern Ocean, sometimes it gets real the seas get mixed, and you can get two waves from slightly different directions, maybe 30 degrees off, and the confluence of those two waves coming together can form an enormous wave. And we happened to get on one of those things, and we were literally like up on a ski slope. And he says to me, we're up like this, and you don't have much room to turn a boat when it's blowing 40. You can't go up 5 degrees because it'll tip over, and if you go down too low, it's going to broach. So we're pretty much in a cattle chute, of true wind angle. And he says to me, "Are you going to go down that?" I said, "Mate, we are going down that." And we went down this enormous wave. And I'll never, ever forget that. I don't think he will either. I wish I had a drone shot of that wave.
What did you think of the last edition? I mean, the Volvo seems a million miles away from what it used to be.
Yeah, I think it's hard to say, Shirley, really. They've really created a race that's one design, very close. They go around the world kind of in a pack because the weather's going to do the same thing to each boat, and they have the exact same sail inventory. And, people always ask me, do I miss the America's Cup or do I miss the Volvo Ocean Race? And the truth is, I think I was very, very lucky. I think I did both those events at the best of times. And with regard to the Whitbread and Volvo, we weren't exactly strict one design. They were box rules, and you could design your own sails, did a little different sizing. And what that did is it led people to different trajectories in the weather window. Whereas nowadays, if they all want to go the fastest speed with an A3 up, they're going to go exactly down the same course. So a lot of people like that, though. They think it's horse racing and it's real close. We did probably more weather routing and playing with our sail combinations to figure out what would be the right route to take given a certain weather forecast.
The whole Volvo Ocean Race is going down a different route. Are you across all of that, and do you think it's right?
I do. What I really like, and it's kind of the first time in our sport we've seen it, at least recently, is confluence rather than divergence. So I like that they're trying to use the same boat to do the Vendée Globe and which is the single-handed around the world race, and the crewed around the world race, the Volvo Ocean Race. Use the same tool. They'll have to make some modifications, but net it provides kind of around the world race every year, alternating between the single-handed and the crewed. And for sponsors and even for fans, you just get more continuity of the product, to put it in a clinical term, which is the racing. And the fans love it and the sponsors love it. So I applaud Breezius and Johan Celine for doing that. And I think there'll be some details. It'll be a little hard to sort out exactly, but I think they're on the right track.
Change is never easy. It's never easy, particularly in something like the Volvo Ocean Race that is such a history and such a legacy. Yeah,
it is hard to change, and I don't know how we'll look back on the one design era of the Volvo 65 that they just finished, the two editions they just finished, but I think it's a good move to go to the IMACA and use it for both. And it's a very fast boat. It basically is going to foil in the ocean, so that's, it'll be pretty exciting. Half of the population of Italy was watching us on TV. 30 years I had been doing the Cup, and Nathan comes along. He's the youngest guy by far, and he gets to drive. I'd had the mustache for 30 years, and I just thought it was time for a change.
I've got to ask you, Paul, if you're enjoying your first podcast experience. I apologise that we're in my bedroom. I did try to be, under a palm tree somewhere on a beach, but this will have to do.
No, I'm honored to be doing this with you, Shirley, and I think a podcast for sailing will be very well received.
Are you a podcast listener?
I've listened to a few from some Marines, a guy named Jocko that I like to listen to, but I wouldn't say I'm huge. I've listened to a few TED Talks.
What would you say about the last America's Cup? I know you were there throughout of it. What do you think about the direction of it all?
I worry that the fast boat concept that we're on for the last 3 editions, last 2 that we've seen, and we'll have it again this next time, isn't as compelling to the public as the type of boat where the crew maneuvers play an important role, where the strategy and positioning at the start play a very determinant role. I do know that we watched the starts with Spithill and Burling in Bermuda, and there was a bit in that, but the times when Burling was behind and went around the first mark behind, he just found a lane. Either he jibed first or he jibed after, and the speed difference was so big. It just, if it was car racing, if it wasn't for the fact that sailing has wind shifts and puffs of wind, not steady wind, you could just send the 2 boats around the track independently of each other and just record the time. I mean, that's what we were watching. We were just watching a time trial, a speed trial. And I think that's a little bit of a shame, personally. I would like to see more mixing and drama and, the crew. Like in a football game, I mean, people really get into the offensive line guys, 330 pounds, and they're crushing the quarterback and, stuff like that. So I think, last time for sure it was a little brutal with the cyclores and all that. It was just, you got the feeling that Blair Tuke and Burling were sailing the boat and the other guys were pedaling as fast as they could.
And a young man's game as well. I mean, I think that it's the first time really the Cup has been so in that direction.
Well, you're right. When I first did the Cup in '83, the young guys were on the bow, and then you got to the back of the boat by having been in the Cup a few times. And I remember that was striking to me in Artemis. My 30, that was 30 years I had been doing the Cup from '83 to '13, and Nathan comes along. He's the youngest guy by far, and he gets to drive. It's just, with the history of it all, that wasn't quite right. But that's the game that we created, and I have to say I was very supportive of Oracle and Russell and what they were trying to do, and we've run that test now twice, and like I said, I'm not sure it's as compelling as, let's say, the 2007 America's Cup.
The next Cup looks even more strange.
It's going to be more strange. Now, they did get some other entries, but I think that's just a bit of a farce, really. I mean, even if they got some new entries, how are you going to beat Ben Ainsley, who's been working on it, is a second, and they're already sailing their prototypes, and American Magic and Team New Zealand, it doesn't matter. You could have $500 million, but if you're starting today, you will not catch up to those people.
When I was thinking about this podcast, Paul, I was remembering when we filmed with you for an entire week. It must have been maybe 2010, and we followed you around for CNN, lots of different locations in Europe, and one of them was Portofino, and I never forget that. You speak very good Italian. It was a bit of a surprise, and also you were really recognised there, that people would stop you in the street. I mean, what's that like, and why has that come about?
That's all off Il Moro di Venezia. I mean, Italians are I think like Brazilians in terms of being fans. They don't even understand the sailing. The taxi drivers and the people who followed Il Moro di Venezia had no idea about sailing, never been on a boat, lived in the middle of Italy somewhere. But if you've got the flag of your country going, those people are behind it, whatever it is. And, half of the population of Italy was watching us on TV. for the 10 days of the Americas, well, the finals against Team New Zealand and then the America's Cup. And yeah, it was just shocking to me when it was over in San Diego and I went back to Italy we had a little tour of, yeah, we were downright famous. It was hard you couldn't get down the street. So that was an interesting thing to go through a little, and you really see how people like Michael Jackson, people who are really famous, just have a hard time coping and living a normal life. It's virtually impossible.
You were quite recognisable back then. And I looked at a little bit of the footage, and of course you had the moustache. You were the most recognisable sailor in the whole sport. What happened to that, Paul?
Yeah, well, I had a girlfriend who agreed, I would say. I wouldn't say she talked me into it, but I just thought it was time for a change. I'd had the mustache for 30 years, and that's the Marlboro Man look, and I think Marlboro Man, was happening in the 70s and 80s, and now the scruff is kind of in. So
hard to say goodbye to an old friend, I bet.
It was a little odd when I did it, and even just the tactile sensations of not having it there, and my daughter said to me, "Dad, there goes the brand." And she's kind of right. I was much more recognizable. Yeah, now it probably cut down my recognizability in Italy by more than half.
When I look back at my medal pictures, I've got these terrible haircuts. And at the time I thought, I had quite a good look. I wonder what you think now when you look at the photographs of Paul Cayard with the tash. What do you think?
No, I like it. What I see more than just the mustache, I see just, the younger face, and everything's nice and plump and firm, and, I'm very happy with the life I've lived.
All right, let's get back to something more serious. You entered the America's Cup world at a very young age. How did all that happen?
Well, I was mentored by a guy named Tom Blackaller, and first I started crewing for him in the Star when I was 18 years old. He was running a laser clinic at an island that St. Francis Yacht Club has up in the Delta behind the bay. And I was about 15 at the time and was part of a group of kids, including Kostecki and Russ Silvestri and John Bertrand, the American who won the Laser Worlds 2 or 3 times. We all grew up together, and Blackaller was 20 years older than us, and he came to speak at a clinic that we were having, and he kind of noticed me, and then he probably waited a couple years. I was probably a little too small, and then he asked me to crew for him in the Star, and did that for a few years. And then when I got out of college, it was 81, I graduated from university, and he said, "Come on, Cayard, we're going to go do the America's Cup." So
and how old were you then?
I was 22. So I went and did it, and I was a jib trimmer the first time, and then for Fremantle in 86, I was the tactician and really running the sailing program for him. We had a 2-boat program. He was trying to raise the money and deal with the designer and things like that. So I made sure we went sailing every day, and we went to the gym every day. And then for that one, I was 26. And in the middle of all that, I had met Raul Gardini. I've met a lot of Italians because I skippered a boat in the 84 Sardinia Cup and basically was the top boat. So I got all the Italian. I started to get my Italian recognition in the sailing world then. Gardini asked me to work for him directly after Fremantle. I had been working at North Sails. And I started North Sails One Design with Vince Brune. So in the old days, fin sails were made in Pewaukee because it was Peter Barrett. Star sails were made San Diego Loft because it was Vince and, well, Lowell, of course. And then they decided, though, that we should make all One Design sails in one or two locations. So we had North Sails One Design started in San Diego, and there was another one in Germany. So Vince Brune and I started the one in San Diego together, but I didn't last really long cutting the corner patches for snipe sails. That was my first task.
That could get tired.
Vince said, "Paul, you need to learn how to make the sail. So you go cut some corner patches for snipe mains for about 3 months. So I was doing that, and then someone said, hey, they need a skipper in the Sardinia Cup for a 50-footer, Frere's 50-footer, and Herman says Cayard should do it. So they sent me over, Blackwater sent me over there, and we did real well. So anyway, I met Gardini.
You never finished the corner patches?
No, I left the corner patches behind. And so then I had my first opportunity when I was 29. Mr. Gardini, we had won the Maxi World Championship the same year I won the Star World Championship, '88. And then he said, Paulino, we have to do the America's Cup, and I'm not going to do it without you. And in those days, it wasn't that common. You had to be a national of the country. And what it meant in those days was I had to move to Italy for 3 years. And that I would be racing against the San Diego Yacht Club, which I was a member. And, and so I was a little scared and intimidated, but I came to the right conclusion, and I went and did it, and it was a huge, apart from the success that we had, it was just a great life experience. Like you said, I can speak fluent Italian. My daughter was born there. It's just, Italy is a huge part of my life.
And you won the Challenger Series.
And then we won the Louis Vuitton Cup. Yeah, it was huge. We lost 4-1 in the America's Cup final, but we beat Russell Coutts and Team New Zealand in the Louis Vuitton final, and that was a big dogfight there. Bowsprit protests, and we were down 3-1, and we came back and won 5-3.
Did you ever win? Did you ever think you could win the whole thing?
Maybe the time that I thought I had the best chance was 2000 with America One. There was just enough unknown out there, and we got to 4-4. Well, actually, we were up 4-3 against Prada, and we lost the last 2 races. And we got our boat real late. We got the race boat in the 3rd round robin, and we just didn't have enough time to really know what we were doing with it. We made a couple mistakes in the setup of the boat, and so there was a lot of potential there, but then Prada did get shellacked pretty good by Russell and the team in the finals, 5-0. So, probably we wouldn't have won.
As a Brit, we've never won it, and we live in hope that one day Ben Ainsley will bring the America's Cup back to Cowes where it belongs. As an American, where does the Cup sit on your radar? Is it the ultimate prize?
Yeah, I think it is. It is. It's just got the history, 160, 65 years. So, that has a lot of value, and a lot of teams and famous people have chased it, and all that salt that people have put in, blood, sweat, and tears, and that adds value to the trophy. And I think it still is the pinnacle event in our sport.
What about you? What's your personal relationship with it? You've come so close.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame. I was in the finals 2 editions in a row, 92 and 95, and lost them both, and very close in 2000. So the 90s was my decade for the Cup, really, and it didn't happen. When you start to sail in the Cup, a lot of good sailors haven't won the America's Cup. A lot of good the skippers of my era, Chris Dixon, Rod Davis, Peter Gilmore, they never even raced in the America's Cup as skippers. Rod Davis, So the fact that I got there twice as a helmsman, I have to take some satisfaction from, but it's such a complex game with the boat being so important. Even then, the boat was very important in the outcome. It's not a star or a laser where we're all pretty darn equal with the equipment. And if you're Robert Scheidt, you're probably going to win because he's just the best sailor in the world. The America's Cup, Dennis Conner was the best sailor in the world probably in 1983, certainly in the America's Cup game, and he almost won with a much slower boat. He got to 3-1 up, but that was largely due to some mishaps on the Australian boat, the wing keel boat. And in the end, they came through and won as they should have. The boat was much faster. So even then, when the best sailor in the world was having a go at it, he couldn't overcome the speed factor.
We've not seen you in the Cup arena since Artemis Racing. San Francisco, the big boats in 2013. I know that was a really hard time for you. You were in charge of Swedish Artemis Racing, good budget, and on the outside anyway, it looked like an amazing project to be involved in, until of course Andrew Simpson lost his life. I know, Paul, that that moment had a profound effect on you. What do you think now, as time's passed? What do you think of that whole time?
Well, I mean, the most important part of the whole time was that a great guy lost his life, and it's hard to put into words what that means, really. I was with him in the gym in the morning, I remember, and he was telling me it was his wife's birthday that day, and what he had planned to do that night, to take her out to dinner and everything. And you can't imagine a more opposite scenario. So yeah, it affected all of us. It affected Ian Percy the most, of course, because he was so close, having won the Olympics with Bart and grown up with him. And it was really Perce that pushed to get Bart there, and he had only just gotten there about 3 weeks before the incident happened. So that's the most important thing about that Artemis America's Cup, and it's unfortunate because it's not a good ending. As far as the whole project goes, we had a lot of heartache, frustration, difficulty, I would say, on the design side, because our designers kept telling us that the boats weren't going to foil, and we were saying, well, New Zealand's down there foiling, and yeah, but this isn't going to work, and this isn't going to work, and then in the end, obviously they were all foiling, and we had to do a huge last-minute about face from a design standpoint to try to catch up and play the game, and of course it was way too late. So it was really stressful and a shame that we were just technically on the wrong path.
You seemed different though after that, and I just wondered how perhaps it affected Paul Cayard.
Well, it's a heartache. I had done the America's Cup 6 or 7 times, and I had many amazing experiences, and that's probably the last America's Cup I'll do or be in charge of, and it just ended. Not only did it end badly, but it ended in the loss of life. And I've sailed around the world twice and around Cape Horn 3 times, and I've never lost a man. And I wasn't on the boat that day. I was in a rib. So, but it was just, yeah, I mean, those are scars, basically.
Now, Paul, when you look at the sport, I mean, the speeds it's getting faster and faster all the time. You hope that at least the game has changed from a safety point of view. What do you think when you see that?
Well, there's risk, there's risk. There's risk in sailing around the world. People have died sailing around the world, and there's risk if you're a mountain climber. And I don't know that we should throttle back the sport because it's dangerous. I think a slower boat might make the racing more interesting and compelling, both for those who are doing it and those who are spectating. But, Shirley, there's risks in a lot of sports, and sailing has just become more extreme in recent years.
But we're seeing it throughout the entire sport. We've just seen Francois Gabard foil across the Atlantic alone. What can be safe about that?
Well, he didn't capsize. I guess the autopilots are that good. It's all about technology, and it's evolving all the time. And the autopilots are, whether the boat's on a hull and doing 30 or foiling at 40, 45, I guess the autopilot is doing its thing. And, the day it doesn't, he'll flip over.
It looks now like the Volvo ocean race boats will in some way foil also. It's a massive change, isn't it? When you look back in your career and you see where the sport is now, what do you think, and where is it going to end?
Yeah, you know what, Shirley, I'm not in awe of it. I sailed big, heavy maxi boats and 12 meters in the America's Cup, and the maxi boats used to go around the world, Sayula and those kind of boats, Flyer. They were big Swan 77s, and they were going trundling around the world. Now, we've got canting keel boats. I mean, who would have thought, well, the keel's going to swing 40 degrees either side, and the boat's going to plane at 40 knots. And then now, that's already 15-year-old technology, and now they're going to foil. So it doesn't surprise me at all. I wouldn't throttle back on that. I think it's just natural progressions. The kite boarders are foiling too. Everybody's foiling. Everybody who can is foiling. We haven't figured out how to make the starboats foil yet.
No, there's a challenge. So how's it been, Paul? How have you enjoyed your podcast?
I've enjoyed it. I hope I've been able to share a little bit of myself with your audience, and I'm super comfortable doing it with you. As I said, we have a long history of doing interviews and sharing the sport we love with the fans. So anytime.
It's been a joy speaking to you. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you.
He's a fascinating character, fiercely driven, talented, a believer in his own ability. But the thing I love the most about him is his honesty. He backs himself and says what he thinks. And I loved that story of him and Grant Dalton in the Southern Ocean. We'll definitely ask Grant about that when I see him next. Please let me know what you think of Paul's chat. Leave a note on iTunes, or I'm pretty easy to find at Shirley Sail on Instagram and Twitter, just me on Facebook, or send an email, podcast@shirleyrobertson.com. That's about it from us for this month. Next month, well, I'm not too sure what to tell you about next month's guest. When it comes to superlatives, I guess there's quite a few I could use. Is he the busiest man in sailing? Is he the most famous man in sailing? Possibly both of those, and a whole lot more. He's won the America's Cup for 3 different nations. He's been knighted for services to the sport. But he's also one of sailing's most contentious characters. He's a fierce competitor out on the racecourse and in the boardroom. And next month, we sit down for an hour of chat with Russell Coates. Thanks again for listening. It's really great to have your company. And as ever, a massive thanks to Tim at Vertical Films for editing and producing the pod, but mostly for his unwavering enthusiasm for it all. Legend. Until then, thank you so much for listening. Have fun on the water and sail safe, everyone.
This is Castle 1, Raytop speaking.
Pressure coming here, pressure coming.
We're 1.5 below.
Stand by, 2 dives here, boys.
We're looking at 10.5 and 42. This is Castle 1 standing by. Out.